Hi, I was lucky enough to get an early release copy of the new Bastl Aikido. It's a dynamic VCA and mixer, a very cool little module that combines a 4-channel VCA with a 4-channel mixer with mutes and also a dynamics processor with a sidechain envelope and a spectral envelope. What does all this mean? Well, don't worry, in today's video I'm going to take you through all sorts of patch examples that show you how to get the most from Aikido. Aikido is composed of 4 channels, A, B, C and D. You can use them as individual VCA channels, but the output of A normals into B, B to C, C to D, so it's a cascading mixer. In addition, you also get this mix output, which is the mix of all the channels. You have these 4 level faders here, which allow you to open and close up the VCAs. They'll go up to unity gain and then boost up to +6 decibels of extra gain, and has a lovely soft kind of clipping, so it's actually not a harsh clipping at all. And then you have these mutes, and they're clickless mutes, which means this is a great little performance section for just basic mixing in your patches. The best way to understand how something like this works is to hear and see it in action. So let's get patching. I'm just going to take the output of the mix here. I'm going to patch it into the input of my filter 8. That's wide open. And we'll patch this into the input of channel B. And you'll see why I chose channel B in a moment. You can hear the output of the oscillator. Let's then go ahead and patch an envelope into the CV input on channel B. And we'll just take an envelope here from this very simple envelope generator in Ornament and Crime. I'm just going to clock that from this square wave here on Batumi. Now, if I open up the VCA using the attenuator, turning it positive, we can hear the envelope sounding out. If I have the fader at unity and I punch in an envelope, you'll hear that distortion. Of course, I can turn it the other way, and we get that side chaining or pumping effect. Let's use this behavior now with the side chain on channel A. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just mult the clock now, because I'm going to need it in a few places. I'm going to send it into Quadigy. I have Quadigy configured on envelope channel 1 to effectively act as a clock divider. So I'm just going to patch this here into the trigger input on kickall. And then we're going to patch the output of kickall into the input of channel A. And now, if we unmute, we can hear the kick. And you see this little green light here illuminating? This is the sidechain envelope being generated. You can set the speed of it from slow to fast. The sidechain envelope is normaled through the CV input of A and throughout the other CV inputs. So basically, if there's nothing patched in here, you would have that sidechain envelope normal the whole way across. It's also available on this envelope output, so I'm going to patch that to my oscilloscope. If you look on the oscilloscope, I'll just pause it. There we go. You'll see that nice, crisp, fast attack and slow release of the sidechain as the kick dies out. We can also have it on fast mode, which generates an even tighter envelope, or slow mode, which generates a much smoother envelope. Let's just leave it on mid for now. The sidechain is normal to CVA input, so I can actually boost up the kick using its own sidechain here, so give it a bit more punch. Now I'm going to just patch the output of TB3PO into the Voltproctive input here on twin waves, and I have this on a square wave. And now I can bring up like a standard mixer. But we can't hear that kick punching through, so what I want to do is sidechain channel B against the kick. So what we do is take advantage of the normaling, so the normaling of CVA goes to B, which means the sidechain envelope has been normaled into channels B VCA. I turn this down to negative. Open up the VCA and you can hear the kick punching through. And of course, there's nothing stopping me taking that sidechain envelope and patching it somewhere else. So for example, I can patch it into the pulse width modulation here on twin waves, open that up. Now let's explore channel D, which is this spectral envelope. Now the outputs of all the VCAs normal into each other. So channel D ultimately gets all four of the channels mixed together, as well as this mix output. But what it does is it's running a spectral envelope, which is basically analyzing the frequencies of the signal, not the amplitude. So the sidechain envelope over here is on the amplitude. It's looking for that rise of the kick. Over here, we're looking at the frequencies. And it does this using a kind of series of bands, trebles, mids, or bass. So if your signal is very bass heavy, then you will see more of a envelope generated here using the bass output. Let's look on our oscilloscope, and I'm going to patch the spectral envelope in here, and we'll turn on channel D. Now you see on the bottom of the screen what the spectral envelope looks like, which is very much more tracking the sound. Now I have it set to bass. Here's what it looks like for mid-range frequencies, and here are the treble frequencies. There's very few of them, because after all, this is a very bass-heavy patch. What are some fun things to do with that spectral envelope? Well, one thing that I found is great fun is to take that envelope and patch it into a filter. And I'm going to use the exponential FM input here on filter 8. We'll turn that up a little. Now I've patched this spectral envelope into the exponential FM input on filter 8. I've opened the filter wide open. Let's just take a listen. And now if I close the filter, we get that lovely squelchy acid techno sound. And opening back up. The pulse width modulation, which has been driven by that sidechain envelope. And also the dynamics and frequency of the sound are controlling how these envelopes behave and change, which is in turn allowing us to modulate other parts of the patch. Now that I've gone through a basic overview, let's go through some patch examples. I've spent about a week playing around, coming up with all sorts of ideas for how to use Aikido. So hopefully these will give you some ideas and inspirations for your patches. Let's do a patch breakdown of this rather mad looking patch here. Now this is one that I just played a second ago, and it's this lovely blend of kind of rhythmic elements coming from a squid sample here through the carry filter, which is not how I usually do it, so it's kind of fun, and blending the different oscillators coming from Bastl Pizza through the Aikido, taking advantage of a few of the features here to create different effects. So let's have a look at what's going on. Well, I want my kick to be audible all the time and not to get filtered. So I'm just going to take the output of channel A, because the kick's on channel A like we normally do where the sidechain is. And so kick A is the kick. Today I'm actually using the TB3PO applet, but then I'm taking the clock out of it and I'm doing clock division using the quality effectively as a clock dividing function generator. So each of these envelopes is in external looping mode. They're generating gates, and I've set different clock ratios here. I'm going to do a deep dive video on the quality showing you how to do this, for example. And that's going to be triggering these rhythmic samples here, which we will hear coming out of squid sample. First of all, we're not hearing anything because I've patched in 3 different outputs from the pizza oscillator into Aikido. Let's just turn up the slider. You can hear the first one and the third one. These are the 3 built-in oscillators, and I've got a lot of modulation going on here from Batumi into various parameters on pizza, just to keep it all interesting. But how about we take advantage of that sidechain? Remember, every time the kick comes in, we're getting a sidechain envelope sent to the other channels. If I set this to be a positive offset now here using this, now the kick is actually triggering the different oscillators. And we can bring in that rhythmic element from squid sample as well. Let's take advantage of the spectral envelope follower to add even more movement to the sound. So let's take the spectral envelope follower and patch that into, say, the mod input on Akari, and then we're going to have the cutoff down low, but the mod attenuator up positive. And what this will do is whenever the envelope here is generated, it will then send a positive envelope shape, shall we say, into the mod offset here, and so open the filter up momentarily. So we'll get this kind of glitchy filter effect that's in time with the sound, but actually generated by the sound. Let's take a listen. For this patch example, I'm going to show you how we can actually use Aikido to pan left and right channels from one oscillator. And we're going to use that to create an interesting stereo rhythmic effect by panning it with a clock synced LFO. I'm just going to mulch the main output from Pizza here into the B and C channel inputs. We will take B and C output as the left and right channels directly. Now I'll patch the B and C outputs to the left and right inputs on Akari because it's a stereo filter, so it'll preserve that stereo relationship between the left and right channels. And then I'll patch those left and right outputs directly into my FX Aid, which we will be using for a little bit of reverb and delay later. But for right now, I have that turned off. I'm going to use Batumi as my master clock, so I will be able to do clock divided square waves. And I'll mult it into the clock here on TB3PO, so that's our sequencer. I'll also mult it to the clock input of Quodigy, and I have envelope 1 set to be in clock divider mode, so this is effectively acting as a clock divider for me. And I'm going to patch that into channel 1 here, which is my kick. And I also want to use the kick as part of my side chaining like I showed you previously. So what I'll do is I'll just patch the output of the 1 and 2 out where the kick is into the channel A input here on Aikido. What I'm going to do is just bring the faders down to 0 on both of those B and C channels for the left and right channel. Turn the attenuverters to the hard right and hard left, maybe actually 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock. I don't want to go too far. And then what I'm going to do is take a clock synced LFO, and I'll use this sine wave here, and I'm going to patch that into the B and C channels. Now when I unmute the channels, you'll hear the oscillator moving quickly from left to right. So wear headphones for this bit. So we can hear it go left, right, in time with this LFO over here. But that can be a little bit disconcerting to have it jumping like that. So what I like to do is just bring up the 2 faders just to get a little bit more of the middle sound, and then we have the sound moving left and right like that. Now I've patched up a few more elements of the patch real quick. I've got some drums patched in here, so these are being triggered by just clock divided square waves coming out of Batumi, and now I can bring in this stereo panning. But now I want to add a little bit more movement to this. Let's take advantage of the fact that while we're stereo panning, we also still have this envelope here. And I'm going to patch that into control input here. And we get this lovely movement in the waveform because I've mapped that to be the wave folder here. I love using Batumi especially in the divide mode, for just creating on-the-fly clock triggers for drums. We can really have a lot of fun with that. Now we still have access to this spectral envelope here, but what I can do is I can just take the mix output, which you remember is the mix of all the channels, and patch it into the D envelope. Turn on D here, and now I have my spectral envelope, and I can use that to modulate something else based on the sound coming out of here. So that's a quick example of how you can use the Aikido as a panner, a left and right panner, in response to an LFO. Of course, you could manually control it. But when you do that, you actually have a lot of control over other parts of the patch by using your sidechain envelope and the spectral envelope to modulate movement in the sound. And when you're panning things left and right, clock syncing that movement of the sound with the panning really adds a lot of dynamics to this, a lot of kind of expression to the sound, makes it a lot more interesting to listen to. I programmed in a fun 8-track rhythmic pattern here on my Oxy 1 sequencer, and I patched that in here, so I'm taking 8 triggers out of here into the 8 channels on my squid sample. And if we just take this and patch the output of samples straight into the filter, we can actually hear what this would sound like. So plenty going on, lots to play with. You know, we can modulate the filter, lots of fun. Well, what can we do at Aikido here? Can we take maybe some of these rhythms and fade them in and out, so do some sort of dynamic mixing of this, and also take advantage of the side chain and the spectral envelope to kind of change what's happening maybe in the filter? Let's take the 4 outputs here, because Squid Sample gives you 4 pairs of outputs, and we're going to patch them into the 4 input sockets here. Let's now patch the spectral envelope output. And we're going to take that and we're going to patch it into the exponential FM input on filter 8. Okay, now I'm going to play with some more rhythmic modulation of the channel levels using the square wave outputs from Batumi, which I have in phase division mode, slaved to my master clock coming from the Oxy 1. Now again, I've just zeroed out all the attenuverters and set all of the level faders here to unity gain. So let's just take a listen. This is what, I've opened the filter up and there's no FX8 effects. That's kind of what our pattern sounds like. So interesting, but we can play around with this a little bit more. Let's now bring all of the faders down to 0, so we hear nothing, and start to open up the attenuverters. So now these phase divided square waves here are slicing that beat up. It's kind of fun, isn't it? So we can now still use the spectral envelope, bring in that other kick. And if you want to hear more of a particular channel, just bring up the fader. That's a lot of fun. That just shows you how you can take a very straightforward rhythm and make it even more interesting by rhythmically slicing and dicing it using the VCA on the Aikido, combined with adjusting the faders and also the attenuverters and some rhythmic LFOs or modulation sources from elsewhere in your patch. Right, for this closing patch, I've swapped out Bafako Kickall and I've put in another Bastl module, which is Bastl Timber. Timber is a dual wavefolder wave shaper. It's got a overdrive circuit on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, it's got a wave folding circuit, and you can crossfade between the two of them here using this crossfade knob. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my triangle wave here. I've got a super saw coming out of here into the input. We'll take the output of the crossfade output into channel 4, or D, sorry, channel D on Aikido. And that gives me access to the spectral envelope, which I'll use to modulate my filter up here. I'm just going to open up the filter, so we've no filter effects. I've got rhythmic elements coming out of Squid Sample here. I have a kick. And all of this is being clocked from Batumi over here, so I'm using Batumi as a series of triggers. And I actually really like playing around with the sliders on Batumi to change up the rhythm. You can get good breaks and bills as well that way. So I've patched the envelope follower here out of Aikido into the crossfade CV input, and I've turned up that on Timber. And now we're going to use the envelope follower that gets triggered every time there's a kick to crossfade really quickly between the two sides of Timber, and we're going to patch that into channel D here. So now, if I turn off the modulation, see, I can control it manually. Now my sidechain envelope lets me cross-fade between these. And I can play around with this. Well, I hope you found today's video on Bastl Aikido useful and has given you some ideas for patches that you can use using this really flexible module. I really didn't think I was going to have so much fun playing with a 4-channel VCA. You know, when Bastl approached me, I was like, oh, okay, a VCA. But this has turned out to be an awful lot of fun to play with. It's got so much that you can do in terms of modulation. You've got these extra envelopes. I can really see myself reaching for this module an awful lot in patches to come. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video. By all means, leave me some questions and comments down below, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.